So here we are again with Rachel Bran. We're going to get back into it. Folks, like I said before, it's very important to think about your mental, spiritual, and physical health. And a big part of that is actually listening to PRT. Scientific studies done by myself and Anthony and Tony and my dog Elvira have yielded tons and tons of facts and evidence that only we are allowed to look at.
And they are peer-reviewed by myself,
and
Wolf, and Elvira.
And Nelly and Tony peer-reviewed them also. We didn't actually have them read it. We just flashed it at them in the hallway, and they nodded their head in acceptance and approval. And therefore, I'm going to tell you right now, you will feel better, look better. I'm talking probably you will age in reverse. I'm talking Benjamin Button. If you listen to Paranormal Roundtable, and especially the live streams, and I don't know, I've just heard rumors. I don't know if this is true. We haven't scientifically proved this, but if you join the Patreon, the $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier, you will become smarter. You will look better. You will probably become stronger too, and you will make better life decisions. Just by making that decision, you've made a better life decision.
Yep.
And so, anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there, folks. This is purely for entertainment purposes only. Wink, wink. You can't see me winking. But honestly, though, I really do in my heart believe that you would get some real benefits out of listening and watching and participating.
Especially hitting the like button. Don't forget that.
Like and subscribe. Yes, exactly. So welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. This is PRT. Join us in the real reality. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are people who are very negative that will say and do negative things against us. Those people have had terrible luck that do that. They will have things like their sock will go missing in the dryer and they will never find it again. It just disappears. It's gone forever. And it's because they are very negative. And then they'll misplace like their baseball hat and they'll find it just somewhere else. The dogs chewed it up.
It's those damn gnomes.
And then they'll have like their pair of shoes. The one shoe will be across the room and it'll make them late for work. See, this is the kind of stuff what happens when you attack Paranormal Roundtable. That bad energy just gets on you. And so to dispel that, you need to pay attention, listen, learn, and join the Patreon. That's just
exactly
our scientific studies that we did at Josh Turner Labs.
You attract those malicious little people to your house with all that negativity by not listening to us.
Or big people. Depends on, how big you are. If you're a little person, then a 6-foot person is big to you. Anyway, get out of here. We're messing around. So anyways, we're going to bring on our guest again with Rachel Bran. Rachel, so when we last left you, we were talking about all these weird things and we were doing the vampire, talking about what was going on with that. Do you want to expound on that a little bit? Like explain to me, like you were talking about a photo. What's going on with that?
Oh yeah. Years ago. And I can't say much about it because I was sworn that I would not mention it. It would have been something that I couldn't put out there, but it could be verified by the one I told you about. And she didn't want me to bring it up.
Well, I'm going to call and rat you out tomorrow. So go ahead. I'm going to take care of that. Don't worry about it.
There was a very old photo.
But you don't have to say any names or anything or bring that. Don't even mention that person's name. It's not important. And you don't even need to say anything. That's best if you don't. And the less information you give about where you live, the better, honestly.
Yeah.
It really is.
But here's the thing. Funny thing about me, I have no fear of any of them.
Yeah, I noticed you're pretty fearless. That's a good thing though, because we're not supposed to live in fear,
I don't have, the only thing I fear is God. And I have no fear of, some people will say, well, I don't guess you fear them because you've dealt with stuff like that. But I don't fear vampires. I really don't fear werewolves that much. And I don't know if that makes me crazy or if it's or what, but I don't
either. I used to have a fear of the dog, of what people call the Dogman, but I know now that it was probably something more along the lines of werewolf, skinwalker, whatever. But I don't fear it. I don't. I was talking to a guy the other day. He grew up in Arizona near the reservation, and he was like, his dad always told him, "Don't walk around outside at night in this area." And he did because he had no fear. But when he encountered something, which I'm not going to get into it tonight, but he invoked the name of Jesus. He got down on his knees and prayed, and then this thing just walked away into the woods. And I was like, well, a group of trees, where he was at. And I told him, I said, did you fear that it was going to? He said, I had some fear in my heart when I saw this thing, but I felt completely at peace when I prayed, and that was just the end of it. And it just looked like a dog-like thing. He said dog-like, and it was just, it just stood up and started walking like a man, and he knew immediately that that's what his dad was talking about. He was 17 years old. The guy's 23 now, but yeah, it's that definitely it can dispel it. I'm telling people all the time, that's what works is Jesus. You have Jesus in your heart, Rachel, and I know from talking to you that you feel that. And so if you have that,
I've got a strong faith in Jesus.
yeah,
I have a strong faith, and even though I dealt all my life with this, it was a battle in my life between good and evil all the time. I mean, it's always going on. As long as we live, it's going on. I mean, the spiritual is very much real. Is what you don't see is more real than what you do see. It's that. I mean, it's just it's right there.
when you saw the picture that you were talking about,
Yeah,
what were your emotions? What were
yeah.
your thoughts?
I did. I went all the way back from North Dakota back down there and to Kentucky to see it.
Wow. And it was,
Yeah,
and what are you able to talk about?
I'm able to talk about that. It looked just like us,
But it was an
me and
old,
her.
old picture.
It was a very old picture. And the thing of it is, I had on a green gown and she had on like a scarlet red one. But mine, and the funny thing is, my birthstone is emerald. And it was us. I mean, it looked just like us.
Do you think that it was people that looked like you from the past, or do you think it was like a reincarnation of you, or what do you think?
Well, I've never believed in reincarnation, and I still, don't. But it was so strange. I mean, it would definitely, it was shocking to see how much like us it looked. And we were supposed to have been born in New Orleans
Wow.
back in way back. And I did have a chance. I mean, the freaky part of it is I married a man with the last name that this person said that my name was from back then. Because me and my second husband, after we had, and the one I'm married to now, my second husband, we reunited, but we broke up, and I remarried this other man, and his name was the same name as the name that this person that gave her that I was.
So how
That
did
was freaky.
that is weird. And so how would
And
that be unless there's
she could collaborate it,
so she could corroborate it, but how is it?
She could corroborate this as being true because she knows about. I don't know if she'd be upset that I've revealed this much, but
But we're
because
we're
she
not
was.
going to see
I
the
mean,
picture. We're not going to show it or
there are
anything. But
some people that are afraid of vampires and
sure, I mean a lot of
werewolves.
people are. It's one of the most feared creatures when it comes to children. They're afraid of vampires. It's like saying the name shark, the word shark. It terrifies people. So does vampire. Werewolves. I mean, so you think that your cousin, right? Is that your cousin?
I'm her aunt by marriage to the
Oh,
first
your
husband.
okay. So she'd be your niece by marriage. You think that
Mhm.
she has what would you be called, a werewolf or a dogman that's been after her?
That's been up on her heel. She lives down there in Kentucky, and it's regular there. People have seen it, and it's there, definitely.
What do you think what does it look like? What has she told you?
She said that it was about 8 or 9 foot tall, It had actually walked on top of her home. She heard it. She saw it enough to make it out, and she said it's a werewolf. And the way it howls, it sounds like a person in pain, and yet it had a howl of a wolf.
And when she sees it, she said, absolutely, it
She
looks,
saw it.
it
Yes,
looks like a,
absolutely. It couldn't be nothing but a werewolf. It walks on 2 feet,
yeah.
and it's that tall. And I told her that I could give you her number if she didn't care. And she said she didn't care, but she's very iffy about talking about the picture of us and what happened back then because she'd promised that man she'd never mention it.
Well, she doesn't have to talk about the picture. She could just tell me about the werewolf, the Dogman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let her know.
But I did have a chance to go to New Orleans, and I will tell you that this is true. I walked the streets of New Orleans by myself in the dark. It was around 12 o'clock, and I felt like I knew the place better than I knew the place here. It's weird. I said it's so strange that I could do that and not feel no fear or nothing. I felt like I just knew where I was at, and I hadn't been there but a couple times. It's weird. That's what I told her. It was so freaky. All this is so freaky. If it hadn't happened to us, and both of us know that this happened, and we've been putting like two and two together. I mean, it's mind blowing, really.
You know, there's a weird thing, Anthony. We had a story that was in the email. I moved it over, and I didn't know. This is the problem. And now Tony was kind of complaining about this a little bit on the show the other night, but like, sometimes you get stories, and this is something, Rachel, I can tell you, that we get stories and we don't know exactly how to classify them. So there was a guy, and I teased him because I think he looks kind of like Bill Gates. I told him, I said, his name is actually Phil. I'm not going to say his last name, but it kind of rhymes with it. And I was like, that's weird. I said, you kind of look like Bill Gates. And he goes, no, don't tell me that. But he's actually a really nice guy. And I spoke to him very briefly. I didn't get to have a real long conversation with him, but it's so weird. Like his story is so bizarre. But it's not really his story. It's his brother-in-law's story, and he is getting me in touch with his brother-in-law. I'm supposed to be talking to him. Probably as of the time of this release, I will have already interviewed him. I'm pretty sure. But he had told me, he said, you're not gonna believe this, but me and my brother-in-law, we think that we had lived before. And he knows that his brother-in-law, like he's almost positive that he was unalived, I guess we have to say for YouTube. Sometimes we can say killed, but who knows? Somebody might get triggered. But he thinks that that his brother-in-law for sure, but maybe him too, that they were unalived by a vampire, and that it happened in New Orleans. And they looked the same. Like when they came back, because they took a trip down to New Orleans, and this is a freaky, weird story. But this is not the first time I've heard something like this. I was in a group where people were talking about, reincarnation. And so I didn't know whether to classify this as vampire, reincarnation, or what this is. But the guy claimed that they were unalived, and the reason that he knew that they had been there before is because when his brother-in-law and this guy's sister, they're married, right? The brother-in-law said, I saw a picture of these two guys, this old picture that this woman, she basically talks, she's a psychic, right? And she told them they had lived before, and she produced a photograph of them and that they had been murdered in the 1870s there in New Orleans. So that's a weird thing right there, and, my nephew, Anthony's cousin, he lived in New Orleans for like, what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
And he saw some weird stuff, dude. He was in that cemetery of Madame Laveau, and he saw a werewolf, like a big thing. It was like a shadow, and he's talked about it on the show, and then we've put it in the book. I believe it was in the werewolf book, but It's so weird that city has so much weirdness to it. And so what if, and I'm just spitballing, what if that is what happened to you and your friend? Because you had
It's
this,
weird.
well, okay, what if you just say this is spin off here into an alternate reality for just a minute, Rachel. Let's just say that you had the same thing that happened to the guy that I call Bill Gates. It's not I just call him that. But let's say that the same thing happened to you and this guy. And so the vampire creature comes to your door when you're in the womb to claim you because maybe it murdered or it unalived your niece by marriage and it didn't get you, but it's coming back for you because maybe you did something to it, or it just trying to finish what it started. And it's doing, because there are these Nephilim bloodlines that people don't realize. Somebody had asked me about Mike Myers and they were like, well, I don't watch those kind of movies. And they said, well, why would he be trying to kill his sister? She didn't do anything to him. And I'm like, yeah, because it's good and evil. She's the good and he's the evil. That's the whole point. And it's soft disclosure in Hollywood. They're telling you that if you have that gene or Rh blood, you know how they talk about the blood?
Yeah.
So
bloodline.
So bloodline, yeah. The evil, if it can't use you, then it wants to destroy you. Because then you could wake up to the real reality and start fighting the good fight. So it's just going to go ahead and take care of it from Jump Street. And if it can't, because if it feels like it's not going to be able to, or that you're going to turn good. And I don't think all of these entities have the ability to ascertain that, but there are higher entities, archons. And people always talk about the fallen. Well, the fallen are locked up. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the rebellious because they are not locked up. They are absolutely roaming around. They're the ones that Jesus warned his brother James about. And he told him to leave Jerusalem, flee, for their ark is full of archons. Jerusalem is a very wicked city. And now they're like, oh, it's the holiest city. Really? Because Jesus says it's not, basically, and says this place is not, it's wicked. And it's run by wicked people. It's inhabited by wicked people. And everybody says, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. Well, it will be once Jesus comes and reestablishes the kingdom of Jerusalem, but not until then. It's just full of wickedness. And people will argue with me all day long and try to come up with, mental gymnastics of why that I'm wrong. I don't care. I'm not going to spout something off if I haven't done the research. But what I told this guy, I said, what if you, and I was spitballing with him. I said, what if you'd lived before and you escaped. And now he's having these weird dreams of this vampire, which is really like a shadow that comes to him. And I don't know. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but Rachel, it sounds weird. You have this picture of you from over 100 years ago, you and another female that you're related to.
This man sent it to her. And he wanted to research my bloodline. He wanted to go to Romania, and she didn't want. After she saw the picture and stuff, she didn't want any more to do with it. And he was scared. He didn't want his name mentioned. He was afraid something was going to happen to him. He thought he was going to be unalived by what he was getting close to.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big fear.
He told her. He said, "Your friend is a very powerful woman."
And that's a real fear, but you're not afraid, right? I mean,
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of him. Oh,
no. And we shouldn't live in fear because a lot of times the anticipation of what could happen to you is the torture, the actual act of doing it. Like when I used to fight, I'd get nervous before any fight. I'd get nervous, and I might have beaten up, 1,000 people in a bar fight. It didn't matter, and I would do it on a whim. But when you have that anticipation, then you have to wait. Now, once you get in there and you start throwing down, you're fine. Especially with those tournaments back in the day where they were like Iron Man, where you had to fight 2 or 3 times in one day. It's second, third fight, I didn't care, But just getting that day, the next day, knowing you have to fight again, and then you feel that weird feeling, and it was I got that from every baseball, football, basketball, wrestling, boxing match that I was ever in, even if I was in Little Dribblers, Pee Wee League football, or Little League baseball, I would just, before every game, I'd get a little bit of a nervous antsiness about me. But once I got in there and I started doing it, I was fine. And my dad said, all that is fear that's messing with you. He used to tell me that. He goes, fear will make you not want to do anything. And the fear of failure is a huge thing, Putting yourself out there every week and doing shows, that you learn to not be afraid. And it sounds like you have confronted these things so often that you're not afraid. You know that you're protected. But it's sad because so many people they're just so afraid of the other side. They're terrified.
I've saw demons. I've saw all kinds of different things. I've saw apparitions, like when we were going up to my mother's, and that the man that owned the store, I saw him on the porch, and I asked my husband. I said at that time, I said, let's stop and get a can of pop. No, we're not going to stop. We're going to be late. So we get up to my mother's house, and she said, did you all hear about Reuben? That's the man's name. And I said, what about him? He died last night. I said, no, he didn't. We just saw him. Yeah, he's dead. He died last night. I said, I said, and I told my husband, I said, his name's Cecil. I said, you saw him too, didn't you? He said, yes. And my dad, who had a temper, and he said, well, you didn't see him. You saw somebody else. And I went up to my grandfather's house, and I called Allie, who was related to him. And she said, yes, honey, he died about 2:00 in the morning. And then my cousin went to his funeral. I said, Lorraine, what was he wearing? And I said, wait a minute. I said, don't tell me. I'll tell you. I said he had a light. I said he had a light blue, kind of whitish looking shirt on, a dark blue pair of pants, and he had his hair combed over this way. And her eyes got big and her mouth open. How did you know? I said, I saw him. The apparition, yeah. And so did my husband. We both saw him. And I threw my hand up and waved, and he raised his hand up real slow in a wave, just like slow motion. That's why I was so adamant that he wasn't dead, because he was, it wasn't like a mist or nothing like that. It was solid. Just as solid as I am here. Yeah.
And how did he pass?
He died in his sleep. And it was at 2:00 in the morning. It was around 9 something that morning when we was on our way to church that we saw him. I've seen things all my life. As a matter of fact, my son, who's my firstborn, he could see into the spiritual. Very clear. And he says this house here has a portal in it. And there is something. I've ordered it out in the name of Jesus Christ. It'll leave. And it'll stay gone for a long time. And I don't know if it's something else that comes in, because one day I was on the phone to my niece from my first marriage, the one I was telling you about. And it sounded like a 200 or 300-pound man come rolling down the stairs and hit up against that door. There's nobody home but me. And she heard it on the other end of the phone. It's so loud.
Yeah, and the thing is, if it's a lot of different type of activity, if there's a lot of different looking if you're seeing multiple different things.
Oh, there's a lot of different things. Yeah.
That could be a vortex, not a portal. Like a portal is sort of a specific thing that's opened for a specific entity or entities.
There is a hole down in the basement, in the very bottom of the basement, where the washing machine is. This is a World War II house. It was built back in that time, and the washer drains down into the bottom of the basement. My son, when he was here, he saw this thing go from the upstairs, and it came down and went back in the basement. He said, whatever it is, it's going from the basement up to the upper level.
This is North Dakota, right?
Yes, North Dakota.
Okay. Yeah, because if I was going to say if you were in Kentucky, that would make perfect sense, because it's
this is North Dakota up here. Yeah.
God, it's cold up there.
It is.
It's one of the coldest places in the country.
It is.
Yeah, because in Kentucky is just full of caves. I mean, everything
It's,
is
it's
caves.
and mountains, and yeah. And I was born and raised. I mean, it was up a holler. They call them hollers, just a little holler way back in between two mountains.
Why did you move? How did you end up in North Dakota?
I met Rick, my husband. He's me and him had an off again, on again relationship. Now we're too old. We're better friends than anything, but we're married. Yeah, we get along good. Yeah, but me and him broke up, and for good reason. And I've warned him, if he ever did it, that I'd get married again so fast to make his head spin. He didn't listen, and I'm true to my word. And that's how I met Mr. Dupree and ended up in Louisiana. And that's how, it just so happened that the last name of the woman that looked just like me was Dupree.
That is bizarre.
It's even more bizarre than that. She knows more than I do because she was the one that was talking to this person and had got the stuff, and I went all the way down there to see it. And if I was an easy to faint person, I'd have probably fainted. When I saw it, it looked so much like us.
It's such a weird parallel between that and a story that I was given by this other guy. But this other dude, I mean, like his brother-in-law and his sister went to New Orleans, and it was given to them by a psychic, like a picture. It wasn't that long ago, though. It's during it could have been AI generated. That's why I told him. He said, I don't think so. He didn't believe it was. He said it was
this happened so long ago that it was before AI was even probably a thought.
See, and now that you say that, it makes me think that maybe he's telling the truth, that or what he believes is the truth. Because I honestly thought, okay, one of these psychics pulled something on you. They're just like, you know what? I'm just gonna trick these people. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? I kind of had this feeling that that's maybe what happened to him. And when to hear you say this now,
with me and her, there's no way that he could have a picture of me and her at that age, and to even look like that. It was uncanny.
Yeah, that is so weird. And then you have this thing that's kind of like following her. And was she living in Louisiana?
No. At that time,
Kentucky.
back then, yeah, both of us were, according to this person.
No, but I mean, like, was she
born and raised in Louisiana?
When you lived in Louisiana in this life, let's put it that way.
But when I went down there, when I met and married that man, and I had the chance to go to New Orleans, I went to New Orleans by myself and spent a night. And I was walking the streets, and I felt so alive, and it was dark. I mean, things were closed up. I was out there on the street walking, and I felt like I knew the whole city. Actually, like I'd been there before. I know it sounds crazy, but it was weird.
And maybe you had been.
And it's freaky. I mean, it's really freaky. It freaked her out, and it freaked me out. And neither one of us believed in or believes in a past life, but to
sometimes
see that,
whether you believe or not,
we know that there's no way that he could have got a picture of us. It was impossible.
And he wasn't a psychic or anything like that?
I don't know what he was. She was the one talked to him. I have no idea. I just know that she said, you need to see this. You need to come down here and see this. And I went down there for that reason. And when I saw it, it was shocking.
Mm-hmm. Imagine.
And especially my birthstone being emerald, and I was dressed from top to bottom in an emerald gown and something like back. It was French. The dress was French made, both dresses.
See, and if you were a guy like me, let's imagine me 15, 20 years ago, I would have just like started strong-arming this guy until he told me how he got it. I'd be like, you like your legs? No, I'm just joking. He'll be like, okay, all right, that's how I got it.
And like I said, that was before AI was even a thought. There's no way it could have been that.
Yeah.
And because this has been, oh my gosh, 20 some years ago or more.
So this makes me want to go back and talk to this other guy and see if
maybe 30,
kind of
maybe
put it on
30
the
some.
back burner a little bit there, but I guess I need to get on that. So let me ask you this. So you saw this creature when you were 6 that you think maybe was the one that came to the door, this
Yeah,
vampire,
I think it was a possibility that was the same
but you
thing.
never saw it again after that?
Not again.
No, thank goodness. But do you feel like there have been other things that were a part of this, or was that it?
There's other things that would come to the house. Like one night I saw a shadow. The moonlight was coming in through the bedroom that we shared with my grandfather and grandmother. Me and my sister was little, and this shadow of a female that to me it looked like an old witch, and it just showed up on the wall from the outside, and nobody ever come around the house like that. And at that time of night when we were in bed, it couldn't have been nobody else. It was some freaky something or other. And then every morning at a certain time before daylight, I'd hear somebody chopping wood out at the wood block. Nobody'd be out there. I'd looked several times and nothing was there. It was just it's a weird something that would happen up there.
Chopping wood, I mean, not possibly tree knocks, like Bigfoot type thing?
No, you hear the axe hit the.
It was an axe,
the-
yeah. And if you've chopped wood, it's a very specific sound. You know what it sounds like.
Yeah, it was because my grandfather would chop wood on that.
Yeah.
It was his chopping block, and he would be in bed, and nobody else out there.
Yeah, I've chopped firewood. I've had to. I know what that is. I've had to do it.
Yeah.
So you heard this, and but you never saw anything attached.
I'd look out there, and there'd be nothing there.
And then you saw shadows, and then you also
I
earlier
would see shadows in the night on the wall,
Yeah.
apparition shadows of things coming.
You also mentioned that you had once seen a demon. Now, and you've seen ghosts and demons, and I want to back up just for a minute here before we get into that. Your son, in the house you're living in now, he saw. How old was he when he saw this thing go from?
The house I'm living in now, my one son, that was at the time he was my third son.
Mm-hmm.
He said he saw something that looked like a goat that would jump from one bedroom and jumped into the next.
Whoa!
And it appeared to him as an old man once. He thought it was his stepdad walking up the stairs, and he looked, and it was an old man with a cigarette in his mouth. Then my daughter, that's the youngest, she has seen this sleep paralysis. That's why I think that's demonic, because she thought she had sleep paralysis. And I said, Zoe, I don't think that's what it is. And then one day she's watching TV, and the thing come in the room, and she was wide awake. That's in this house here. And I just ordered it out in the name of Jesus Christ, and it would leave. And I haven't heard anything in here since that day that the sound like the 200 or 300-pound man was falling down the stairs. But every now and then things will come in, and then I just order them out in the name of Jesus, and they leave.
That's interesting though, because so Anthony, I know that face you just made when she said the goat-like thing.
Mm-hmm.
We had a guy on the show recently who, I guess, would be a couple weeks ago as of this airs, but he was talking about a goat-like creature biting him, and that's so weird. And we're talking about vampires,
Yeah.
and we've heard now that's probably the half a dozen times we've heard of a goat-like entity biting someone, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, did this thing ever bite him or do anything to him?
No, he covered his head up, he said, with a blanket, and he could feel it around him, but it didn't touch him.
God, these creatures are so, and they're insidious, and I swear that they're vampiric at their hearts, dude.
Oh, yeah.
They're parasites, and they take energy, and they take blood. And we all this time, everybody's like, we want to hear more about vampires. But their thoughts of what a vampire is was very specific. Like it's like a guy that goes around acting like Dracula and does things, has some abilities, when the truth is very different.
It's more of an umbrella term.
Yeah, it's an umbrella term for, multiple different species of creatures. And then you have them with the black goo and all the stuff that goes along with that. And it's just so weird, dude. Like, I don't even know what to think. And you hear about it from the UFO community. The UFO community has their own like black goo. The ghost community has their own black goo. And now we have the cryptid community talking about the black goo. But the problem, like I've said before, is this compartmentalization. And I'm saying this because, Rachel, you're a listener to the show. You already know. But to the audience that's listening to us, not the YouTube audience. This is the audience that doesn't go and participate in the YouTube. That we are trying to connect the dots. We are making headway, and trying to figure out what this could be, and come up with at least a plausible theory, a working theory of like connecting all of this. And it comes down to these, there isn't just one answer. There's multiple things, multiple entities that are all doing the same thing, but I think it comes down to energy. That's what they're doing. And they're causing fear and chaos in people's lives. And it sounds like you've had to experience it for a long time. How do you cope with here's a question, because you said you'd seen demons and ghosts. How do you cope with it messing with your children? Like, how does that, and you're not afraid, but like one of the ways that they can get to you is to get to people you care about.
They have, Satan has tried to use my children. And my oldest daughter, she got involved with a man that was not, at that time, I don't know how he is now, but that time he was not. I knew that it was wrong for her, and she was warned by a preacher at come to the church that somebody was going to come into her life and tear her world apart. And then she met this man, and I'd prayed to hear God's voice audibly. I know my daughter did, and her stepdad Rick, he hears God's voice audibly. And it's with me, it's like annoying, but it's not me that knows it. It's God letting me know it. And he got her to run away with him. She's old enough to get married. I mean, she's 21, but she was going to college, and he got her to quit going to college. And that evangelist had told her, don't stop going to school. If a man cares about you, he'll wait for you. But he got her to quit school. And I was laying in the bed, and I was just distraught. And because he basically got her to just cut off her family. And I heard this voice, and it was Satan's voice, and I heard it audibly. It was just like we're talking. And it sounded almost like a goat bang, or how you say ba, ba. I don't know however they back like that.
Yeah.
Can you get her back? Like that. Audibly. And I wasn't scared, but I admit that I did not know what to say. I was at a blank. My mind was blank, but up out of my spirit and out my mouth came the words, I can't, but God can. And it was God giving me those words to speak. I never could get her back. It was 15 years, 16, and she passed away from breast cancer.
Mm.
He didn't even want us to he didn't want us to even know where she's buried.
Jeez Louise.
That's terrible.
And I prayed all night. I walked the floors praying. And my son that hooked this computer up for me, he said, I found her. The funeral home, which was in Idaho, had put in a notice of her being there, I guess, obituary. And I asked my husband if they would go the next day and go out there. And my one son, the third son, the one that's seen the thing in the room, he's grown now. He said, Mom, he said, I don't have a good feeling about flying out there. He said, I don't have a good feeling. I don't. And he wanted to go, but he said he didn't have a good feeling about flying out there at that time. And he don't care to fly, but he this particular time he did. And he said, let's take our truck, but my truck, but I need a battery. So they got a battery, and my husband and his son and our son, our sons, they went, and they didn't know how they made it out there because they said the road was closed in Montana, somewhere in Montana, around through Idaho, the mountains. I mean, it's horrible. The mountains, a snowstorm, a blizzard. The roads were closed. And he said he didn't see no road closure. But I kept praying. Me and my youngest daughter and my next oldest daughter was praying, and we prayed. And I didn't eat anything for 4 days and 4 nights. I was praying. And they went out there. They said, we don't know if we could show the body because she'd been in the freezer for 5 days.
Mm.
She had not been embalmed. She didn't want to be embalmed. But they stayed there, and the funeral directors were amazed because when they pulled her out, it just looked like she was asleep. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe it. They didn't think that they could even show her. And my husband said it looked like she did when she was here at home, like she looked like she was 21 years old. And she was 36.
And you think that these evil people come across your path because, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Satan is used everything he can at me.
Yeah.
And he's through everything. He's the only way to hurt me is he's used my kids.
He's trying to create spiritual openings within you.
Mm-hmm.
And just like with my 29-year-old daughter, she's beautiful, but I told you a little bit about it, Josh, what happened in her situation with her husband.
Horrible.
Now, yeah. So it's Satan's throwing everything he can at me, but it's not stopping me from doing what I'm called to do.
Let me ask you this. Let's go back to when you were like in your teens, because a lot of stuff manifests. I know it did for me, and I know a lot of stuff manifests when people are in their early to mid-teens, in particular females. That's a lot of like whenever there's poltergeist activity. We've started to learn that a lot of this cryptid and even UFO activity will be accompanied by poltergeist activity. And there'll be people who would tell us they've had, encounters with entities and stuff, and then they will start to experience poltergeist activity in their house. When you were a teenager, where did you live from the time you were like, I would say after puberty, like until you were out of high school? Where did you live?
I lived with my grandmother and
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
And let me guess, this is when you started seeing apparitions and demons.
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of things, and I was, say the least, I was physically, mentally, and emotionally abused. I mean, my uncle, my grandmother's son, he was a drunkard. He was very verbally abusive. My dad was physically abusive. I actually saw my dad's eyes glow red. The color part of the eyes, I looked in them and it was like fire and red. I actually saw it with my own eyes. And so at 15, I was almost 4 months being 16 is when I married my first husband. I had reservations about it. It was like, at that time, I didn't know how to listen to God speak to me, but I had a strong, just an unction not to do it. And I told my grandmother I didn't think I wanted to marry him. and she said, "You don't have to if you don't want to." And then my mother laid a guilt trip on me, "But he bought you these rings," and she would always she was very manipulative, my mother. And I had empathy. I mean, my empathy is really it's felt like a curse to me, but she would manipulate my feelings, and so I married him,
Hmm.
and then that brought a whole set of other issues.
You know, I don't know how much you've listened to the show, but I know that we interviewed Monica Rollins from is it Our Paranormal World?
Yeah.
So Our Paranormal World host Monica Rollins, she went through a very similar. She got married when she was young to a guy who turned out to be not right for her, to say the least. He was very abusive, and she talked about it on the show. And a lot of that, was just about her survival. And of course she saw this like werewolf type creature and some other things in her life. And I think that this is what I'm going to say. And I think this is when it pertains to you, Rachel, and these other, in particular, women who go through these types of things. I think that it is this evil has to like press on you. That's why they call it oppression. It's pressing on you, and it stays on you, and it keeps up the attacks periodically to keep that foothold, that toehold, and to drive you from Christ. And then you become confused, you become, whatever. And then it sends manipulative and evil people in and out of your life like waiters just to come in
Oh,
and
it was very much similar to that. I mean, it was like attack after attack after
Mhm.
attack after attack. It's like
Keeps you
you don't
tired.
have time to
Mm.
breathe in between the attacks.
Yeah. It keeps harrying you. And then what it does eventually, and that way you're more focused. Because if you're more focused on fighting an enemy that's physical enemy, you don't really get time to yourself to regroup and go after the root of it, which
The
is
source.
the spiritual source, of the enemy, which, and you don't have time to go back to your spiritual source, which is God.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're constantly fighting these flesh wars.
You keep you focused on these agents of this demonic will,
Mm-hmm.
and these people don't realize that they're not even following their own will.
The agents of the Kali Yuga.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. The time period that we're living in the time of sorrows.
It's meant to keep you focused on the flesh so you don't nurture the spirit.
And so that's what it did.
That was very much the way my younger years were. And then when my sons, when what happened to them, then the anger and rage, which was in my dad's bloodline, which is a murderous, bloodthirsty rage. I've never, I had never felt anything that strong, and it latched on, which I gave it a foothold because I wanted to murder the ones that hurt my son. And I could taste blood in my mouth, and it was not my gums or my teeth because I have good teeth. Um, it was it was just, I was so enraged, and I was going down there to do it. And there was these thoughts would come into my mind. All you have to do is concentrate, and it'll happen.
Yeah.
And it was trying to take hold. There was witchcraft in my bloodline too.
Well, that's a
And
given,
just
especially if there's vampires and werewolf. There's always like this connection, this tether.
and there was this one woman. She begged me to get into this thing she was in. She was a priestess in this
Ugh.
religion with Papa Legba and Pomagera. Oh,
Mhm.
Pomagera likes you. She wants you to join with us. And
That's
which
voodoo.
Papa
Mhm.
Legba is
It's voodoo.
it's this. I mean, she was. It was getting bad, and I was giving in because I was the anger and the rage and I never felt that much anger and rage until that happened to my kids, and I just and then that's when I think it latched on the hardest is because of that anger and rage and that murderous. Just it was it wasn't that I was thinking about it. I was going to do it. I made my mind up, and that's when it got the biggest hold.
There is a story, and it comes out of Beaumont, Texas, and I remember hearing it also in Hearne, Texas, and I think that there's a large black population in both of those cities here in Texas, and I've actually heard it from two different friends, families, not them themselves, but their families. I went to a crawfish boil, and we started talking. And my friend, he's like telling his aunt, this guy's into the paranormal, and he's got all these, he's collected all these stories. This is back before I started doing the show. And we got into the whole thing about voodoo, and she had been cursed when she was younger. And I don't remember the whole night because we were drinking, but I just remember us talking about Papa Legba and talking about this creature. I'd say creature. It's like an entity they called the Black Bunny Man. And what he was is like this. He's basically an entity. And when they started telling me about it in Beaumont, I said, "Oh my gosh, there was this guy I used to play ball with." And I met him at one of the football banquets that we were at. We were at this where if you're in a certain, like, when I was a kid, when they'll have these like all-stars or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they call it a banquet, but it's basically just like a dinner, and the parents bring the kids or whatever. And I remember meeting him when I was young, and then he moved to Rockdale, and I played ball with him. And the first time I had heard it was from him, and it was called the Black Bunny Man. I haven't talked about it on the show yet. You know the story, Anthony. They're gambling, doing things you're not supposed to be doing, and this guy shows up, kind of like Legba, and he's dressed up like a dapper African guy, and then ultimately he turns into this creature that looks like a slimy bunny, and its ears pop up. But the bunny part, I think they're mistaking, like, it's not. I don't think he's really a bunny so much as like he's a rabbit man or something. That's what they describe him as, because he's got these big old teeth that come out, and that face comes off, and it becomes like a rabbit, and then those teeth will bless you, they'll fly up from the back. But we've heard of Dogman looking, like that, and it sounds almost like Anubis, because he is like an agent of like death, and he leads these people into destruction. Then there's a whole thing about, I'm not going to get into it on here, but and you said you were almost giving in. That's
I was almost that was the closest I came.
Thank God you didn't, because he's an agent of the underworld. That's Papa Legba is definitely not something that you want to mess with.
And they were just these, and I would play. I mean, there was this place, and it was in Kentucky. There was these younger guys, and which I wasn't terribly old, but I could have been their mom. But they had this house, and it is notorious. They say it was haunted, but one of these boys had claimed that he had been fed on by vampires and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, right there, we're going to stop it right there, folks. And before we go any further, when we return next week, we will continue where we left off with Rachel talking. We'll talk about these vampires, a little bit more about Legba, and I got a couple things that I wanted to go over with you, Rachel, about that. But thank you for tuning in, folks, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Good night.